Rachel Reeves just got absolutely skewered by Sky News with the most brutal question of her political career, and watching her try to dodge the reality that nobody trusts Labor to follow through on anything after 13 U-turns is like watching someone dig a hole while insisting they're building a ladder. Welcome back to UK Political Insight, and today we're unpacking the moment a simple question about faith in government's ability to complete projects completely destroyed Reeves during what was supposed to be a triumphant speech about Northern Powerhouse Rail, why her response about being pretty agnostic on digital ID just confirmed she had no convictions about the policy in the first place, and whether anyone actually believes Labour will follow through on infrastructure promises when they can't even stick with policies for more than a few weeks. I'm bringing you multiple videos today because watching a chancellor give a major speech only to have it completely overshadowed by questions about her government's catastrophic credibility problem is the kind of political car crash that deserves frame-by-frame analysis. So let's dive into why Rob Powell's question was so devastating, how Reeves' answer just made things worse, and whether this government can possibly recover from having destroyed all trust in their ability to deliver anything. Alright, so the setup here is beautifully ironic and needs to be appreciated. Reeves is in Leeds announcing plans to build Northern Powerhouse Rail, which is a massive long-term infrastructure project that will take years, potentially decades, to complete. She's trying to look decisive and forward-thinking, demonstrating Labour's commitment to leveling up the North and delivering transformative infrastructure. It's supposed to be a positive news day, a vision of the future, proof that Labour has big, ambitious plans. And then Rob Powell from Sky News asks the question that just demolishes the entire premise. By their nature, these are long-term projects, but given your government keeps U-turning on short-term projects, how can anyone have any faith that you'll see through this big long-term plan? That's not a gotcha question. That's a completely legitimate observation that exposes the fundamental problem. If you can't stick with policies for a few weeks, why should anyone believe you'll stick with a project for 10 years? The contrast Powell's highlighting is devastating. Long-term projects require sustained commitment, consistent policy, political will that survives electoral cycles and budget pressures. Short-term policies should be easy to maintain because they don't require years of sustained effort. If you're reversing short-term policies left and right, that shows you lack the political backbone and planning competence to deliver anything difficult. So promising something as complex as major rail infrastructure rings completely hollow. Reeves' response is a masterclass in not actually answering the question while pretending to. She pivots to talking about digital ID specifically, saying if you want to get fixated on whether it's one particular form of digital ID, that's fine, but she cares about practicalities. That's simultaneously admitting she U-turned and trying to minimize it by suggesting critics are being pedantic about details rather than acknowledging the fundamental reversal. Her claim that she cares about practicalities, not specific forms of verification, is gaslighting. Starmer announced explicitly at Labour conference that you will not be able to work in the UK without digital ID. Not you'll need some form of verification, specifically digital ID. That was the policy. Now she's saying actually she's agnostic about whether it's digital ID or other forms. That's not caring about practicalities. That's reversing the policy and pretending you didn't. The fixated language is particularly insulting because it implies critics are being unreasonable for holding government to their stated policies. You're fixated on us doing what we said we'd do? Why can't you focus on the broader goals instead? Because the broader goals are vague and the specific policies are how you achieve them, that's why. Criticizing people for expecting you to deliver what you promised is incredible chutzpah. Her pivot to illegal immigration is classic misdirection. The question wasn't about whether illegal immigration is a problem or whether verification systems are needed. The question was about how anyone can trust Labour to deliver long-term projects when they reverse short-term policies constantly. She didn't answer that. She changed the subject to illegal immigration and verification practicalities. That's deflection, not engagement. The statement that we have a lot of people working illegally because we don't have mandatory electronic verification is questionable causal logic. People work illegally because enforcement is weak, penalties are insufficient, and employers aren't adequately checked. Electronic verification helps enforcement but isn't itself the solution. Her framing suggests digital ID was the fix for illegal working, which was always overselling it, and now she's maintaining that frame while abandoning the specific policy. Being pretty agnostic about whether it's e-passport, e-visa, or digital ID completely undermines the original policy announcement. If you're agnostic about the specific method, why did you announce mandatory digital ID specifically? Why not say from the start that you'd implement mandatory electronic verification using various acceptable formats? Because that would have sounded less decisive and tech-forward, that's why. You wanted the headline of mandatory digital ID, then reversed when it proved unpopular. What Reeves fundamentally failed to address is Powell's actual question about faith in government delivery. How can anyone trust you'll complete Northern Powerhouse Rail when you can't even maintain simpler policies? The answer she should give but can't is, "You're right, our track record is terrible, we're going to improve our policy development process and stick with decisions better going forward." But she can't admit that because it concedes incompetence, so instead she deflects and minimizes. The broader context of 13 U-turns makes this question even more devastating. This isn't about one reversal on digital ID. It's winter fuel payments, farm inheritance tax, business rates for pubs, disability benefits, WASPy women, national insurance, workers' rights, and on and on. Each one individually might be explainable. Collectively, they show a government that announces policies without proper planning and reverses when challenged. That's not responsive governance. That's chaos. Northern Powerhouse Rail specifically is fraught with risk given previous government's infrastructure track record. HS2 was drastically scaled back despite enormous investment. Crossrail was years late and billions over budget. Major infrastructure projects in Britain have a terrible record of delivering on time and under budget. Promising another massive rail project requires credibility that government can actually deliver. Reeves has destroyed that credibility through serial U-turns. The lead setting for this announcement is politically significant. Northern England feels betrayed by previous infrastructure promises that were scaled back or cancelled. HS2's northern leg being cut was seen as London prioritizing itself again. Reeves, coming to Leeds to promise Northern Powerhouse Rail, is trying to rebuild trust and show Labour cares about the North. But Powell's question exposes that trust has been shredded by Labour's own actions in government. Why should Northerners believe this promise when you've broken so many others in just months? The fixation accusation reveals Reeves's mindset. She views criticism of U-turns as pedantic focus on details rather than understanding it's about trust and credibility. People aren't fixated on digital ID specifically. They're concerned about a pattern of announcements followed by reversals. Each reversal is just another example of the same problem. Dismissing that as fixation shows she doesn't understand or won't acknowledge the credibility crisis. Her agnosticism about verification methods is actually an admission she never cared about digital ID specifically. It was chosen for announcement because it sounded modern and decisive. When it proved unpopular, she's happy to drop it because there was no principled commitment to that specific approach. That confirms critics' suspicion that policies are chosen for political optics rather than developed through serious analysis of what actually works. The illegal immigration pivot is interesting because it tries to reframe the debate. Instead of admitting U-turn on digital ID, she's saying the real issue is illegal working and she's focused on solving that regardless of specific methods. That might work if the question was about immigration policy, but the question was about credibility and delivery, and she's not addressing it because she can't without admitting the problem. What Powell's question really does is connect short-term policy incompetence to long-term delivery capacity. The logic is airtight. If you can't plan, announce, and implement relatively simple policies without reversing them, you obviously can't manage complex 10-year-long infrastructure projects. The skills required for the former are a subset of skills needed for the latter. Failing at the easier task means you'll definitely fail at the harder one. Reeves is no good answer to this because the premise is correct and the conclusion follows logically. Her only options are admit the government has been incompetent, promise to do better and hope people believe it, or deflect and change subject. She chose deflection, which is tactically understandable but strategically catastrophic because it reinforces the problem. She can't even honestly answer questions about U-turns, so why would anyone trust her to honestly deliver infrastructure? The practical impact of this credibility crisis is that future announcements will be treated skeptically. When Reeves promises Northern Powerhouse Rail, people won't celebrate or get excited, they'll wait to see if it survives first contact with political or fiscal pressure. Every promise comes with mental asterisk, subject to change, likely to be watered down or canceled. That's not sustainable for a government that needs to build public support for difficult long-term projects. The political consequences extend beyond infrastructure to all policy areas. If voters don't trust you'll deliver what you promise, electoral coalition fragments. People who support specific policies see them abandoned and stop supporting you. People who oppose specific policies still oppose you even after you reverse because they see you wanted to do the bad thing originally. You get the worst of both worlds, alienating everyone without satisfying anyone. The comparison between short and long term is particularly cutting because it uses Labor's own framing against them. They position themselves as the party of long